ever since I bought this car, almost probably close to a year ago actually, since I bought this car, I've noticed this car had a weird transmission noise when I bought it. It wasn't too concerning, but it was something there, and I was hoping when I swapped out the clutch and all the other stuff that would fix it. I've pretty much changed everything in the drivetrain, and it's still there, and I'm not exactly sure, and it always seems like it is when it's in gear, and it all goes away when I press the clutch in. So I was thinking like bad throwout bearing or something like that, but I replaced the throwout bearing. I also thought it was bad fluid. I replaced that. I also thought it might have been the axles going bad. I replaced those, and I still haven't. So the only other things that it could be left with is either wheel bearings, but it only makes the noise when I'm in gear, so I don't think it's that. And then another thing would be the actual transmission itself, like something bad with a bearing or something inside the transmission. But this is where I'm at, trying to troubleshoot everything. So really what I have left now is the other clutch components that I have not replaced yet. I'm pretty much going to be replacing the clutch master cylinder, or I believe it's going to be the clutch master cylinder, which is behind the pedal. And then I'm also going to be replacing the slave cylinder. So we're going to see if both of these will help the problem or not. Because one other thing too to mention is, a few weeks ago I bled the clutch, and I was having some weird funny issues with my pedal, and I just thought it might have been air in the lines. But I literally bled my clutch and all the brake lines like 3 or 4 times to make sure there was no air in there, and the fluid being pretty much clear and clean at that time. So none of that was the issue. I mean, it might have helped the pedal feel just a little bit, but it didn't solve the inconsistency. So I'm hoping that replacing both of these will fix the issue. We're gonna start with the slave cylinder right up front, because this one's way easier to get to, and it shouldn't take too long to replace. So really, when you're doing this, you're gonna have the hard brake line or clutch line that you're gonna want to disconnect, which is a 10 millimeter. I'm not using the correct tool to actually loosen it, because these box wrenches can easily round them. I believe they make a special wrench, I forget the actual name of it, but they make those, that way you get a way better grab. So when you're loosening up this slave cylinder, there's going to be the 10 millimeter bolt that you're going to want to crack loose that goes onto the clutch line, and then you're going to have 2 12 millimeters that are holding the actual slave cylinder on there. Once you get those done, you should be able to unscrew the clutch line. You might drip some fluid, try to put a rag down there or something, and then you'll have the 2 bolts, and you should be able to take that right off the fork that is holding on the clutch line. Alright, so after a little finagling, this came out relatively easy. So as I was showing, there's going to be 2 12 millimeter bolts here, and then you're going to have your brake line or your clutch line that go here, and don't spill brake fluid all over the place like I just did. So I pretty much just went with an OEM or OEM equivalent. I ordered these off of Rock Auto. They were the cheapest and the most efficient for the ASIN clutch master and the slave cylinder. So, but looking at these, they look like they're identical parts, so looks good to me. I'm not familiar. I'm going to try to add some clutch fluid in here. So I'm not sure if you're supposed to pre-bleed these or not, or try to get as much air out of them as possible just to make it as easy as possible. I'll see. I'll try to add some in here to see if it actually lets me or not. Alright, well, I was able to get some fluid in there. It looks like some other fluid started coming out. I don't know if these are pre-bled or pre-filled or not, but I got some in there. So let's hop back in the car and swap this in, and then we'll bleed this and see how it feels, if this actually makes a difference or not. Very hard to get an angle in here, but it sits in pretty much just like this. I'm gonna put this rubber cap in there just so I don't get anything in there. and let's try to line up our 12mm screws. So don't think you're not going to make a mess with brake fluid. You definitely will. And through this process, I've dropped my wrench about 3 or 4 times. So having a magnet like this definitely comes in handy. Alright, so at this time, this is when I realized that I messed up, and now we gotta unbolt it, because there is that little squishy rubber piece that needs to go onto the fork of the part. I know it's really hard to tell, but the rubber piece is here and the fork is right there, and at this second is too long and I cannot squeeze it in between. Alright, at this point I've literally had to take that thing off I think 3 or 4 times because I had so many issues with compressing the little pin that actuates whatever hydraulic thing is in there. So if you're looking at this, you're gonna have to compress this pin inside of here so that way you can get it on the fork of the transmission while trying to deal with the brake line and then lining up these 2 holes as well. So I dripped so much brake fluid. I'm hoping that I have enough to bleed this system out, but right now my clutch pedal just falls to the floor, so which is kind of, I figured that out, so I figured that would be happening. So I'm going to top this off as good as I can, and then we're going to bleed the system and hopefully we get a better feeling clutch. So at this time I was manually bleeding the clutch, but I was using a long object to wedge up against the seat and the clutch pedal. I would pump it a few times and then I would go open the valve, let out any pressure, and then repeat until I started seeing no air bubbles. I did notice the pedal was getting firmer than what it was originally, so I don't know if this is going to help, but hopefully there is an improvement, because I do see the pedal feeling a little stiffer than what I did on the other one. But let's take it for a little test drive and just see how it feels. So my initial thoughts getting in here, the pedal feels a little bit firmer, but not like drastically different, but it does feel firmer. So let's just go take a drive and just see how this car feels. So going on that drive really did show me that this seems to be the right path that I'm going, but I'm still not sure. So that's why we have the master cylinder here that we're going to replace now. That is going to be a little bit more involved, and pretty much got to contortion your body underneath the driver's side to actually get to those parts, as well as under the hood. So hopping under the hood, we are going to have our brake master cylinder, which is right here, and then we have this tube that goes right here all the way back into the abyss underneath the shroud here. So I'm hoping that we can take off this shroud and get access to that a little easier. There's going to be a brake line and then that tube, and then you're going to obviously lose quite a bit of fluid, so you're going to want to watch that as well. So it's not really going to be easy to show you exactly what's happening, but pretty much this right here is sticking in the engine bay, goes through the firewall, and then this connects to your clutch pedal, and then this is your adjustment to put some pressure on the cylinder to eat up some of the slop. Yeah. So this is going to be our next step. So like I said, there's going to be a clip and stuff underneath the pedal that we're going to have to disconnect. These bolts go through the firewall, so you're going to have to loosen this from the inside, and then you're going to come over here, and then you're going to have a brake line right here, and then this tube that's right here runs over here as a feeder to feed the clutch master cylinder. So why Toyota decided to tuck this in there, I have no idea. I mean, obviously I do, because the clutch pedal is right there. Super easy to just put it right there. So we're gonna tear into this and then try to figure out the best way to get at this. It's actually been about 2 weeks since I did the clutch slave cylinder, and I did go for that initial test drive, and I do not think it fixed anything. So I'm hoping the biggest issue is going to be the master cylinder. So we're going to start tearing into that now and seeing if we can fix it. So if you do know where the master cylinder is for the clutch, here's the brake, and then the master cylinder is tucked all the way back there. So Toyota really thought this one through. So hopefully I can take off all of this wiper shroud and the wipers to actually get some access to that. So we're gonna pop all this off and then let's see what we can do. As you saw, that I just pretty much emptied out the whole brake master cylinder to try to get as much fluid out there so I don't make as much of a mess, because as I learned from here, I made a huge mess trying not to make a mess. So to save me some time, and I know that I had to take it off right here, so I pretty much brought my little brake fluid. I'm gonna try to reuse pretty much all this because this is practically all brand new. So I just slowly took it out with a syringe, and then when I got to this point, I pretty much tried to hold it and I dumped whatever was in this pipe down into there. So now the rest would be hopping back in here. So still taking off this whole wiper shroud did not make a big difference because everything is still underneath this piece of sheet metal and you can't really get to it that much. There's going to be this line that connects to the clutch cylinder, and then there's also going to be a hard line that is routed over, I believe, somewhere to the transmission. So we're gonna have to try to disconnect both of these lines, and then we'll hop inside and disconnect it from the inside. So let's keep on going at this, trying to not make a big mess, and then hopefully we can get this out in a reasonable time. I was having some issues actually cracking this clutch line off. I originally was using just a normal 10mm box wrench, and it kept actually rounding out the bolt. I did try to make my own flare nut or crowfoot, whatever these are actually called, by just cutting one of these in half, but I did use a very worn out one and I think it was just not working so good. So I went out and actually bought what I actually needed. So I bought a set from Harbor Freight for like 15-20 bucks or something like that, and I was able to crack it loose with this. So now I'm going to actually continue loosening this, and then we'll take this clutch line off and then take it out from the inside. It is actually the next day. It was kind of getting late after I went to Harbor Freight to go pick up that wrench, but now I was able to crack that line loose. So now we can continue disconnecting this line and try to put something in over it so that way it doesn't drip any more fluid. And then we can go inside the car, and there should be just 2 bolts and some linkage that needs to get disconnected. So let's hop on that real quick. After a few minutes of using just a normal 10mm box wrench, I finally got that fitting loose back there, and now this clutch line is free from the slave cylinder. And now we're gonna hop in the car and we're gonna finish undoing the rest of the stuff on the interior. So let's hop in there real quick. If you can actually take a look back there, I have a hole in the firewall from the clutch master cylinder. So I finally got this thing up and out of here. So I don't know how to really tell if one is actually bad or good. The grease or whatever that is inside of here looks pretty dried up, and as well, this plate here, I don't know, it does seem a little oily, like something might have been slightly leaking, but I never seen any leaks, so I'm not sure. But here's the new one. So I pretty much just got OEM or OEM equivalent ones. This is an ASIN. I believe that is the OEM brand. So looking at the part numbers after I take this off, some of the bottom ones look the same, but they're not the exact same part number. But this I ended up ordering off of Rock Auto, so they tend to have pretty decent prices for what they are for the equivalent of OEM. But now I'm pretty sure we're going to want to fill this up with as much brake fluid as possible to try to bleed this out, because I hear that it's really hard to actually bleed these out when they're in the car. So I'm going to just start feeding some brake fluid into the top and then try to get it to suck itself in, to hopefully get as much fluid in there as possible, and then we can just throw it back on. So this process, pretty much, I try to get as good of camera angles as possible, but there is, if you take off one of the panels, you can see one of the bolts like slightly through the panel, and that kind of helps a little bit, which is, I believe, the top one. The bottom one is pretty much blind. I did not see it at all. I just kind of went through. I know it's a 12 millimeter and I knew it was in the right direction, so I just pretty much cracked that one loose, and then I went make sure that it was loose in the engine bay. Then I just slowly went at it with a couple different sockets and ratchets to try to get my length, because you want to have as much reach as possible, but then you end up hitting a lot of the fuse panel on the back. Alright guys, so I'm going to give you a heads up now to not do exactly what I did, because there was a plate on the old one. I forgot to put that onto the new one. So now I have to put this on. I'm going to give it a cleaning first, and then we'll throw this back on. But yeah, I was about halfway done installing this, and then I realized I don't have this on. So don't forget this. Alright, I'm pretty sure I got everything all tightened up. I got the clutch line here tightened. I got the hose right here all done. I just topped myself off with some more brake fluid. I do have to go inside. The only thing I don't think I have together right now, and I'm hoping that after I press the clutch a few times, is if you look on here, there's this like clip that kind of snaps into place on the pin inside of there. And the way I ended up getting it out was I pressed the clutch and it popped out. So I'm hoping that I can, now that this is bolted in, I can press the clutch and it'll press itself back in. Hopefully. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm going to do to get that on, but we'll see. But right now I have everything set up to be good. So I'm going to finish tightening up the bolts on the inside, and then we'll start bleeding the clutch. Alright, so let's just get my initial reaction leaving. Let's see how it actually feels. So the engagement point seems very low at the second, but let's see if it's consistent. Alright, so after several attempts of bleeding the clutch, I finally got it to feel pretty good. And I adjusted it from underneath the car, or underneath the footwell. I guess you can adjust the nut and everything on there. On the mechanism, when you're underneath the car, you can actually loosen this jam nut up and turn this, and actually, I guess it kind of adjusts the height of the clutch, as well as the slop of the clutch, so there's not nearly as much slop. If you extend this more, it kind of forces out the clutch pedal a little bit. I might need to adjust mine a little bit more because it might be sticking a little high, but I kind of like it. But it's feeling really good now, so it's finally nice, consistent. When I let off the clutch, I have pressure pretty much the entire way. Prior to any of doing this, like, I would have pressure about halfway, then it was just pretty much sloppy. So I definitely think My clutch master cylinder did fail on my last one. Not sure exactly how, because it looks exactly the same. The only thing I can think of is some valve on the inside of these clutch master cylinders went bad. So now that we finally got all this settled and working good, I went on a few test drives to make sure everything is working as it should, and it definitely does. So now it's time to clean everything back up and throw all of these parts back into the car. So let's hurry up and get that done, and then we'll wrap this up. If you guys are interested in any of the parts or wrenches or anything I use to be able to work on this, I'll put all the links down below. They were actually fairly cheap parts. I think the slave cylinder was about $35 or $30, and this was about $40. So all in, it was like $70 something after shipping and taxes. So not too bad. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys are new, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.